Hello and welcome to Sonic Lab. Today we're looking at the Roland JDXA crossover synthesizer. This is Roland's new flagship synth and it's their first sort of major departure into analog territory. Obviously we had the JDXI which had a single analog voice, but it was quite limited. The thing about the JDXA, it's got 4 analog voices, much more comprehensive. As well as that, it's got 64 voices of digital supernatural synth engine like you would find in the Integra 7. Now this is a pre-production unit. I want to say thanks very much to Roland for getting us it so early so we can have a first look, but as with all pre-production units, things might not be quite as they are in the finished sort of landing in the shops version. What we're going to do in this part of the review is really concentrate on the analog aspect, the synthesizer engine that is the analog part. So if you have any questions to be answered in future parts of the review, please leave them below and we will endeavour to answer them. We have the unit here. We've got a 4-octave keyboard, which is velocity and aftertouch sensitive. And then the big front panel with lots and lots of controls on it. Backlit red. It's a very red and black thing. And yes, it is shiny. And those of you who don't like fingerprints on your stuff will probably be polishing it forever. But the main thing I found with this layout, although it does look very attractive, and when you look at the end cheeks here, they've got this sort of red livery on them, which does look really nice. The problem I have though is, unfortunately, it's very difficult to read the red legend behind some of these controls, because if you think we've got a bright LED here, which is quite bright, and then a sort of duller legend here, which is actually quite hard to read. And I found that even in direct sunlight, I was kind of peering over to see what it was because of the contrast is not so high. They did make a white one for some DJ somewhere, and everybody was like, oh, that looks interesting. And it would be great perhaps if they could bring this out in other colours, because I found it quite difficult until I knew my way around what I was reaching for. But we've got tons and tons of control here. Essentially, we've got an LFO, oscillators, the mixer, the filter and the effects like this. There's also a 64-step, I believe up to 64-step, 4 bars sequencer, step sequencer here, then the various programmable bits, a little bit of red LCD and the navigation buttons. Down here we've got Roland's pitch and mod wheel, and also 2 additional wheels here, which is a wheel 1, which is like a pitch wheel plus a mod kind of wheel. So there's quite a lot of modulation opportunities here. So in terms of the synth engine, we've got basically it's the digital hybrid crossover synthesizer, which it's billed as. We've got the 4 analog voices, then we've got 64 digital voices, which is the supernatural engine, the same thing that you would find in the Integra 7. In fact, synth tones are compatible between the two. The way the synthesizer is structured all happens at this section here. We've got 4 analog parts, 1 per voice. We select the voice we want to edit, and then we tinker with the front panel and we switch them on and off as we see here. Each of these parts is addressable separate with MIDI channels. You can split them over different ranges or layer them up. One nice feature is that we can edit multiple voices at the same time, up to all 4, or just an individual one, or any combination of which. And then down below we've got the digital parts. These are the 4 digital parts, and then below that we've got each part can have up to 3 partials. A partial is obviously like a building block, an oscillator, and we can edit those individually or together however we see fit. So that gives us the 8 parts. So each of these parts are also separately addressable by the sequencer. So once you start recording stuff, you can build up quite a number of layers into the sequencer, but we'll go into that in more depth later. Let's take a look at one of the analog voices, because I'm sure you're gagging to know what they sound like. So we'll start with triangle wave. This, interestingly, you can actually, on the analog voices, you can bypass the filter completely. So this is it naked. This is into the first filter, but this is with no resonance and full cutoff. So there is quite a lot of sound. So the raw waves sound quite a lot fizzier. Let's go back to just through the first low pass filter, which is but just wide open. Plus or minus 24 semitones, plus or minus 50 cents in either direction. We've also got a square wave. Again, in bypassed, you get a lot more fizz through it if that's what you wanted particularly. Again, switch the filter back in. Then we'll go up to pulse width, which as you know is one of my favourites. We can modulate this. Again, we're only listening to a single oscillator here. Then we've got triangle wave. This is bypass through the filter. Back through the filter. And then also nicely, we've got a sine tone, which gives us quite a lot of extra sub if I bypass it completely. So a good selection of waves there. I mean, they sound perfectly fine. There's lots of other things that we can do when we start dialing in multiple oscillators. Let's bring the second one up. Again, just through the filter. Again, no resonance and fully open. I can dial in maybe a fifth, or if we want a couple of sawtooths, just detune. They can sound pretty good. Now, there is no sub oscillator, which you may or may not have noticed. You can bring in white noise, pink noise, the digital part, which routes the digital voices through the analog filter. Now, I know a number of you are wondering about how this would work. It works in paraphonic mode, so basically you don't get a filter per voice because there are only 4 voices, but you can see that you can at least route them through and drive them if that's what you so wanted. And then finally, we've got the mic position. Now, obviously, this has also got mic input and real-time mic processing for vocoding parts, all that kind of stuff, but more on that later. Back to the oscillator. Just listen to a single voice again. We've also got the ability to ring mod. Well, this is actually cross mod. So we can get some quite extreme cross modulation tones. And we've also, if I take that down and go ring mod as well, if I go to maybe a sine wave, maybe put them both into sine mode. You can get those kind of metallic, clangorous, banging tones as well. Clanging tones, I think I meant to say there. We also got oscillator sync, so we can sync oscillator 1 to oscillator 2. If I bring that up, and now change the pitch of oscillator 1. You can get those kind of quite nice sync tones, and obviously we could route oscillator 1 through the LFO or through a pitch envelope, those sort of things, to get those kind of modulated sync tones as well. So that's all possible. One more quick mention, we can have oscillator 2 be our mod source for the ring mod or the cross modulation, or we can switch it into aux mode, which means that the digital parts will come in and modulate the analog oscillator, which is quite an interesting and unique flow on things. But for now, we're just going to look at the analog section. So coming back here, we've also got a couple of LFOs. Let's just take it out of sync mode. Try a square wave. Let's go into sine mode. We can go quite high, almost into the sort of ring mod, so we can get into audio rate, and we've got positive and negative for each one. We've also got a fade time. Now, the other thing that's kind of cool about this, if I wanted to maybe have 2 oscillators, and I just wanted to modulate one of them with the pitch, let me just bring this down, get them synced up. Now, I have to get into the menu system here. So what we can see is now, if I want to go pitch depth, I can actually now set the destination for oscillators 1 and 2, which is the default setting, or 1 or 2. So that would now mean that oscillator 2 is the only one modulating. Same also works for pulse width modulation as well. So you do have a routing, but it starts to sort of show you a little bit that there is some stuff going underneath the hood that you need to do a bit of menu diving. So the filter. Now this is the next major building block, and obviously we have an analog multi-mode filter here. If I just dial it up, we can have a quick look at the section. We've got a large select knob here, which we can obviously bypass when we're in analog mode, and then a very small cutoff knob, which seems a bit odd to me. I would have sort of thought maybe it should be the other way around, but I guess you need to have an indicator around each one. So we'll start off with the low pass 1 filter. This is a 24 dB kind of filter, when you start bringing the resonance up, you get quite a pronounced effect. And if adding a little bit of extra drive does seem to make a little bit of difference to the sound, but not dramatically. You can actually add additional drive here. There's another parameter, so get that nice, almost Moogie style when you start bringing in the resonance. Right, take that back. Also, worth mentioning, there's a high pass filter as well, which allows you to pre-high pass filter, I guess, the signal. Next one is also a 24 dB. This is a transistor ladder. Take the drive, just drop the level a little bit. Get a little bit more sort of drive and smudge, which is kind of cool. And then the third mode is a 12 dB filter. I like 12 dB filters, they have very interesting harmonics. So let's try that now. So now we've got 12 dB filter, add a bit of resonance, really starts to break up. And this is where it gets interesting, because basically I have to dial back the gain to almost 10, 11 o'clock to stop that sound from happening, and then which means I have to crank the master volume to get anything like a decent signal out of it. But once I do, I get those lovely sing-song harmonics. Drive it a bit, it gets a little bit more extreme. But if I take the mixer any higher, it's just almost uncontrollable, which is weird. And particularly on the high pass filter, where we've got a resonant high pass filter, I have to dial it right back, turn the volume up. I love high pass filter harmonics. You get that lovely sing-song sound. But if I take the level up of this into it anymore, it goes completely to pieces. So it feels like there's some sort of weird issue with the gain structure there, because literally I'm cranking the line inputs of the sound card to maximum just so that I can get enough level in this extra filter mode, in the low pass 3 and the other filter modes. It's fine in low pass 1 and 2, but in 3 it's really sensitive to the amount of input that you drive to it. And if you didn't discover that, you might just think these filters sound really rubbish. They don't, it's just you really have to be careful how much you drive into it. So I have been in touch with Roland, and what they tell me is there were a couple of pre-production models that had this gain structure issue, and this happens to be one of them. They tell me that this is going to be totally sorted in the final shipping version, which is one of the reasons that the JD-XA has been delayed a little bit. But I have to point it out because that's what I see in front of me. Final one is bandpass. And again, you get that nice sing-song harmonic. You can, of course, modulate the filter via the envelope and the LFOs. So if I just give you, maybe bring some resonance in. They can get nice and whippy. Perhaps not as whippy as Moog filters, and the scaling is slightly different, but yeah, you can get that kind of zappy, percussive sort of stuff if you wanted to use them for that as well. Another thing quickly to mention, as well as these two envelopes, we've also got the AD envelope, which allows us to route that to the pitch in positive and negative amounts, and we can route that to oscillators 1 and 2, 1 or just 2, and we select that with this button here. So obviously analog is fine, and we're hearing that sort of analog nature, and it's got quite a lot of available tones, but there's so much DSP in this thing that there are tons of effects. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the poly stack button, and what this does is basically create all of these 4 voices from this one particular master. I could select this part or this part or this part, but it's going to play 4 voices. I've got this one. Now what I'm going to do is add the M effects, which is an individual part effects. I've got a chorus on this, so now I can play my part. I'm going to add a bit of reverb and delay. to do now is I've got another 2 effects that I can add. This is going to use this one, which is a tremolo pan. This is a master effect, so it's global for the whole program rather than individual parts. And this is a pan tremolo. Lovely, so those effects can add a whole lot of life, as with any synth that's got effects. But what I like is the fact that it's built in and we can create these sort of glorious patches. And this is, remember, this is only on the analog voice. When we start adding the digital stuff, it gets crazy. Now, there is a problem though that I have found, and that's when you're looking to go through the effects. So if I go to my M effects here, I switch it on, I go through to the next parameter, I want to choose what the effect is. I've got to scroll through. What are there? 67 here, and I've got to do it with up and down keys. There's no data entry wheel or slider, which I think is quite an oversight really, because I mean certainly on the effects we've got 67 on them. If we're working on the digital voices, we've got things like, I think they're 400 plus. And of course I can shift and go through them in tens, but it's not quite the same thing as scrolling through and discovering certain things that maybe you weren't looking for. Sure, if you know where you're going, you can shift up a load and then get in the region and do that. But I think that's a bit of an oversight, and I would like to have seen some kind of method of data entry, because it is possible. On the effects, we've got 2 algorithm selection wheels, which are both effectively data entry wheels, dedicated just to the effect setting, but no data entry for anything else. It just seems a bit curious choice to me. So that's our look at the analog side of the JDXA. We're going to do another part where we look at some of the other features. Please do leave comments below if you've got any questions that you'd like answered. I may not get to them in the review, but I will monitor them and try and answer them elsewhere. Leave them on Facebook, YouTube, whatever. So stay tuned for the next episode. And if you want to be informed about that, remember, subscribe to our YouTube channel and you'll get notified as soon as we upload something new. Thanks for watching. That's it.
Roland.